Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another live at the waterhole on this lovely, I think it's Monday. Yes, Monday afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us and for joining me. My name is Ben Coley. I'll be with you for the next 2 hours as we head out and about and look at some of the wonderful opportunities that these cameras from Africam and Wild Earth are going to afford us over the next 2 hours. As always, it's live, it's interactive. We can't do this without you, so please do send in your questions and comments. And as always, I will do my absolute best to answer the questions. And what a lovely way to start. Not something we see every day. We've got what looks to be a female hippo and her youngster enjoying some of this flush of green grass after all the water that we've had next to Gary Dam at Juma. And so nice to see so much water in the dam. When I was there a couple of months ago, there was no water whatsoever. There was some rather gelatinous looking mud in the centre, and that was about it. So wonderful that the animals have been able to benefit from the recent rainfall. And you can see this youngster in particular eating with gusto all of that lovely grass that shot up after the recent rains. We've had well over 100 millimeters in the last couple of weeks, and the bush has really responded. I have just got back from a couple of nights in the Timbavati, where they've had a lot less rain than the surrounding areas, it seems, but they've also had about 100 mils over the last week, and the whole area is flushed green. There's growth in the grass, new leaves everywhere, and the animals are very, very grateful for it. I see we've got some messages coming through already. Thank you very much. Penelope Kenyon saying good afternoon to Nadine. Yes, Nadine is in my ear, helping me navigate this tapestry of cameras all across southern and eastern Africa and everybody else at the Wild Earth team. And it is great to be back, Penelope Kenyon. Thank you very much. Yeah, let's hope for some wonderful sightings, but this is a great way to start. A young hippo with a oxpecker in tow. Very happy Monday to Joanne Mello as well. Nice to see you back again. And PB and Jam saying good morning to everybody. And yes, let's all have a wonderful morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. It is 12:33 here in South Africa, but such is the amazing opportunity to broadcast and bring these pictures to people across the world. Time is irrelevant. What is time anyway? That's a little philosophical for 3 minutes in, I think. But let's see. Mercedes Ben, good afternoon to you as well. Saying hello to myself, the Wild Earth crew, and everybody else listening. Happy Monday, and a hello to Lenny as well. Lots of people listening today. Great to see. But how nice is it to see hippos out the water? So often we just get to see their little bug eyes, those little tiny, disproportionately small ears and nostrils, and not much more. The rest of their great bulk hidden between those murky or underneath those murky waters. But amazingly, a two-ton animal has just disappeared behind those guarri bushes. But lovely to see them out on what is a relatively cool and, well, it's humid, but overcast day. So the sun, not too much of an issue for the hippos today. A pair of Hardidar, oh, three Hardidar ibises, ibi. I'm going to go with ibises, never quite sure. The much maligned Hardidar ibis, of course, which is a shame because it's actually a beautiful bird when you look up close. We can't quite make it out today, but the iridescence on those flight feathers are very, very beautiful. Nadine, they are beautiful. If somebody could just gag them or tie their beak shut so that they can't scream at us at 4 o'clock in the morning, I think their stock would rise considerably. Oh, and a heron. Sneaky heron on the top of the tree as well. So those hippos have disappeared. Ah, there's that lovely noise that the hardy does. Doesn't it just take you to Africa? Or Joburg at 4 o'clock in the morning. But that's a nice little friendly reminder how one does need to be careful, particularly this time of year. If you are walking out in the bush, we know full well that there is a mother hippo with a calf, which would be not something that you wanted to bump into. We know that they are there somewhere, but if you were just taking a casual stroll around the side of the dam there, you would likely be completely oblivious to their presence. And a hippo out the water and a mother with a youngster at that would be a fairly formidable adversary if you did bump into her face to face. So always a good reminder never to assume that there is nothing there, even if you see nothing, and that's why that situational awareness us guides talk about so often is so important. Got to listen out for those oxpeckers that are often on the back of the hippo. We saw one on the youngster. Just the sound of them moving through the undergrowth, all very, very important. But on a breezy day like this, makes matters a little bit harder as well. It covers their sound. Ah, there's the little one. Hello, little one. They are funny little things, aren't they? This great big bulbous blob with four little legs underneath, but surprisingly agile for their size. You're going to do well to outrun a hippo out in the open. You can see how those short little legs, when they walk, and if you see their tracks, they're two very distinct lines of where the left legs and the right legs land. And then those established hippo trails, we often get what we call over here in South Africa a middle manatee, which means you get sort of two trails and a little line of grass in the middle, like an off-roading two-track for vehicles, because they constantly walk the same paths and their little legs don't crisscross. So they create two distinct paths and then a line of untouched vegetation in between them. Lovely views of this grey heron. Every now and again, we may get a black-headed heron in this area. Uncommon, but not unheard of. I've seen one or two. They're quite similar, easiest to separate in flight. I always find the underside of their wings are sort of black and grey as opposed to grey and white in the grey heron, but relatively similar and always worth double checking just in case you have stumbled across one of the new species. But just in case there was some confusion, that is definitely a grey heron, but say it is not impossible to see a black-headed heron in these parts as well. Black-headed heron, as the name suggests, instead of having that little sort of black band across the eyes, like he's got his sunglasses on back to front, the black-headed heron has a black head, but also that distinctive white neck and chin as well. Very deliberately stalking through the undergrowth there. Of course, there's a plethora of food now that there's rain. Loads and loads of frogs out and about. It'll be a lovely meal for this heron. Very tentatively pacing along, trying not to disturb the water. Ooh, ooh. There, you got something. I didn't see what it was. Something small. I don't think it was a frog. Could have been a small tilapia or a small fish of some description. The bush is alive with the sound of frog calls at the moment. I think just yesterday evening, whilst I was out on drive, I think we identified 7 or 8 frogs just from their calls. Cassinas and painted reed frogs, banded rubber frogs, plain grass frogs, broad banded grass frogs, little water lily frog whose call I actually learnt yesterday because it sounds like somebody wearing wet flip-flops. Lots of tasty little morsels for this heron. PB and jam, yes, a very striking black cap, and there's little feathers that actually hang off the back, like a little ponytail as well. Very beautiful bird. One of those ones that we see all the time, and we tend to dismiss them a little bit. But if you have a good look at them, there's lovely rich colours on the beak and on the legs. And yes, it's almost like a headband of black feathers that are then ponytailed with the feathers behind the neck there. Very, very pretty bird. But I think we are going to head down to Tembe Elephant Park in Maputoland and go and check in with some elephants. And there they are. A couple of nice big boys there and a slightly younger one in the middle. Saw a huge one in the Timbavati yesterday with 2 broken tusks, but he was collared. And the guides in the area knew that elephant, and they showed me some photos from about a year or two ago of that same elephant. And he had one very, very large tusk, but it seems that at some point in the last year, it has been broken, which is a real shame. Very, very thick tusks as well, I would think. Not too far off the thickness around sort of my shin. A good oh, 6 inches at least in terms of diameter, I would think. How he lost it, nobody's quite sure. Probably in a fight. He was in must when we saw him. Quite normal for evenly matched bulls to get into a bit of a bout of fisticuffs over a lady. And when you've only got one tusk, it puts a lot of pressure on that one tusk. And yes, it seems unfortunately he'd broken it off. Thankfully, not too high up, wouldn't have done any nerve damage. But a shame for him to lose such an impressive appendage. I see we've got one with a broken cartilage again in the ear there. I was actually having this discussion with some of the guides in Timbavati and even some of the landowners that we were chatting to who've been in that area for decades and decades. And some zebra, nice. Don't often see those at Tembe. And I've still have not come up with a satisfactory or heard a satisfactory explanation as to what causes the cartilage in the ear to let's say, be defective like that and for the ears to flop forward. Did see one at Juma a couple of weeks ago with both ears, um, with both broken cartilage flopping forwards over the eyes like a pair of blinkers. But we had a good debate about it, and nobody's quite sure whether or not it is from some sort of trauma at a young age. But we've decided that it most likely is genetic, because the landowner that we were chatting to said he's seen a few herds there with multiple elephants, all with broken cartilages in their ear. And something I've also noticed is that when they are broken and they flop like that, they always seem to be sort of folded on the same line. Now, you would have thought if it was a trauma injury, the cartilage would break in different areas, but it always seems to be sort of along that same line, a bit like origami folding of ears, which sort of all of those points led us to come to the conclusion, for what it's worth, that it's a genetic defect passed down through generations. Spuds, yes, with regard to the girth of a tusk as well as the length of the tusk, it's all through genetics. Just like we have tall people and short people, and some we get people of different shapes and sizes. It's exactly the same with elephants. If we were to introduce some very large tuskers to areas where there are predominantly elephants with small tusks, we would see over the years that those genes would get passed down, and that would manifest in the different sizes of tusks in the newborns. So yeah, very much a genetic thing. Mike, you're asking if that gene will ever die out. Well, I suppose as long as the elephants whom are afflicted with it, shall we say, continue to breed, there's always a chance that that gene will continue to be passed down. So I suppose if we went through a period which, for whatever reason, those elephants with broken cartilaged ears did not breed for a couple of generations, then there is a chance that that problem would disappear. I see no reason why not. Ah, giraffe, impala, zebra, elephants, a veritable menagerie at Tembe. I wonder if we had a really, really bad heat wave and a really, really bad drought, whether that would also reduce the number of elephants with those damaged cartilages on the assumption it is genetic, because you would think those individuals would really struggle in the drier conditions and in the heat, having lost the ability to regulate their temperature so efficiently by flapping the ears, that back of the ear being constantly exposed to the sun, those veins being warmed up, the blood failing to be cooled. I would imagine that that is a potential issue, and one of those reasons why that gene doesn't get passed on too much, because it is not helpful in any way, shape, or form. Certainly hasn't been naturally selected to be kept, and quite the opposite. So perhaps if we had a really bad period of drought and heat, those elephants would lose condition, they would succumb to that added temperature or inability to control their own, and then that would reduce mating opportunities and reduce the chance of that gene being passed on. Oh, this is a very peaceful scene here at Tembe, the lovely green grass and multiple species of animals. But it sounds like up at Oldonyo in Kenya, we've also got a couple of giraffe. Let's go up there and see if we can get a close-up view of one having a drink. Oh, looks like they're considering it, but that elephant has taken a rather defensive posture, and looks as if maybe ushering the giraffes away. These young bulls do get a little bit protective over water sources. This giraffe may have to wait their turn, giving this boy a bit of a wide berth. Yep, looks like the timeshare has been agreed upon. Hopefully, we get to witness that ungainly grace of a giraffe having a drink. That rather uncomfortable looking leg spread, and then having to stretch that long neck all the way down to the water, but easily done thanks to the nuchal ligament that runs up the back of the neck there, that enables the giraffe to keep its head held high despite the weight of that skull. And then as it bends down, it stretches like a piece of elastic. And then as soon as they finish drinking, you'll notice the head almost springs back up and creates a lovely S of water, which is always something a photographer should be aware of. Nice to get the giraffe with that flick of water from the lips. There he goes, stretching out that ligament. Oh, no, not quite sure. Remember, very vulnerable position for a giraffe to be in when it drinks, so they are very cautious, staring longingly at the water there. Hello, good afternoon. Well, 13, how wonderful to hear from some of our younger viewers. Do all mammals struggle with bloating and digestion? Um, I would say probably yes. We do see it. Depends on what they eat. A lot of animals are able to self-medicate themselves. They'll know what to eat. Oh, in times of bad stomachs, we often see the lions and the leopards, as well as domestic dogs and cats, feeding on grass, which just helps to clean out the system. Actually, it's what we call an emetic. It induces vomiting, helps them clear out things in their stomachs that they don't want, be it fur balls or something that they just feel that they need some assistance with in their stomachs. Um, Again, things like saponins as well, which we find in a lot of plants, that sort of soapy material that creates a mucus, has been shown to be good for digestive purposes. And there are lots of trees out here which can help with either runny stomachs or with constipation as well. So tannins are very good at binding stomachs if you have a runny stomach. And there are other chemicals out here which can actually aid in loosening things up and trying to get rid of certain things that have ended up in the stomach. So um, I can't speak from experience that every animal experiences bloating and some sort of digestive discomfort, but I would imagine that that is the case. Something off to the left attracted the attention of both of these giraffes, whether it's some people moving around. You saw them get a bit of a fright earlier, and you saw how all the oxpeckers exploded off their backs. And those oxpeckers also give alarm calls if they sense danger coming. So a perfect example of how nervous giraffes get when drinking, making absolutely sure whatever that was over off the left is no danger before they adopt that, say, rather vulnerable position. Magdadat, I'm glad you're enjoying these calm and relaxing scenes. There is something very, as you say, relaxing about watching giraffes. I like to describe them as nature's lava lamp. You just sort of gaze at them with this rather dumb, smiley expression on your face. Something very calming about them. Look at all of those lovely butterflies enjoying the moisture as well. We often see that out down here as well, around puddles in the roads. And we've actually seen a bit of an influx of the brown-veined white butterflies, which undergo that long migration over multiple generations, generally always flying in a northeasterly direction. Fight our way through the butterflies. See, whilst we wait for these giraffe to hopefully relax to the point that they have a drink, an interesting question came through from Picasso asking whether soft-shelled reptile eggs go through the same calcification process as hard-shelled eggs. Um, as far as I know, no, because the fact that they are soft, so the harder shelled eggs build up of the calcification of calcium and calcium carbonate to protect the embryo inside. The more softer shelled eggs generally resigned to more humid, moist environments, and that's more of a protein-based substance, I believe. I'm sure there is some elements of calcium and calcium carbonate in it, but certainly doesn't undergo the same extent of calcification. There we go. So you can see when she finishes drinking, there's that big flick and the head popping back up, that elastic band being released, just righting the neck again. Very, very heavy head. It will be exhausting to have just muscles holding that big head up the entire time. So a very well-developed ligament does all the hard work for these animals. PB and Jam, the tree in the background, we can just see on the right-hand corner there with the elephant enjoying the shade, is, as you suggested, you said it looks like a huge umbrella. Well, you're not far off, or possibly the one in between the giraffe at the back, but same species, the Acacia tortilis. I can never remember if it's now a Senegalia or a Vachellia in terms of the new genuses, because the Senegalia are hooked thorns, and the Vachellias are the ones with straight thorns. But an umbrella thorn is very easy to identify because it possesses both hooked and straight. And I can never remember which genus it falls into because of that. But it is known as an umbrella thorn colloquially, just because of that growth form that you pointed out. Very stereotypical African shape of tree. If you're going to draw a tree in Africa, that's the tree you're going to draw. But just one of many acacia species that occur in the continent, all pioneer species. They want soil with not very good drainage. They fix atmospheric nitrogen with rhizobium bacteria in their roots. Very good for the soil, making that soil more suitable for, let's say, more complex plants further down the line. So enjoy sort of clay-based soils. They're quite shallow rooted, so you'll often see them getting pushed over by elephants during the winter months. So gain access to the roots and the moisture and the nutrients which are being held in there. Other iconic trees like the marula, for example, likes deep sandy soils, has very strong, deep tap roots that have to get through all of that very well drained sandy soil right the way down to find water. And you'll see a lot of marulas are snapped by elephants as opposed to pushed over because the root structure is so strong that and it is a soft wooded tree as well. That's the trunk will give way as opposed to uprooting the tree itself. Lovely to see two giraffes having a drink. Now a third one just arriving from the sidelines there. Always find it interesting the two different techniques, the legs akimbo versus the leg spread and knee bend approach. I imagine that they will learn that from their parents from a young age. Both seem to be equally effective, but the knee bend does seem to put an immense amount of stress on those knee joints. Of course, those legs are quite specially adapted to stop blood pooling, fighting gravity, with interesting network of veins there that are elastic to ensure good blood flow, the high blood pressure of the heart as well, and that relatively tightly fitting skin, which just stops the blood from pooling, but more the valves in the veins and the ability of those veins to expand and contract depending on the pressure of the blood pushing down on it. The tight skin also very, very important for protection. Those little skinny legs going to get ripped and shredded at by thorns. Also in plenty of sort of direct sunshine. So I always say there's nothing that has more adaptations than a giraffe to be able to deal with that unique body shape. Ollie the oxpecker. How do you tell the difference between a male and a female giraffe? Well, other than the obvious, easiest way is to look at the what we will colloquially call horns on the top of the head, which are officially termed ossicones because they don't have a keratin sheath like a horn does. So the male ossicones are much bigger and chunkier, usually have calcified or calcium deposits on the top of the ossicones, as opposed to tufty hair that we'd find on the females. Because they are used for fighting, they need to be stronger, and they need to carry more weight to make the head more of an effective weapon. Think of it a bit like a mace with a giraffe, with a heavy head on the back of that long neck. So male ossicones much wider or much more solid looking, much thicker, no hair on the top. Females much thinner, often kind of bend in towards the middle and look a little bit like paintbrushes. But a young males will also look like that as well. So just be careful trying to sex a young giraffe based purely on its ossicones, because that calcium deposit is something that happens over the years, an adaptation for sexual selection to allow older, more dominant bulls a greater opportunity to win any potential fights. Wow. How many oxpeckers are on this giraffe's neck? There must have been about 15 or so of them there. Whether he's got a little bit of a mite problem, they are susceptible to mange and other mite-related skin conditions. Yeah. A couple of illies having a bit of a push and a shove. This is how tusks get broken. Bushka, you're asking if there are any species of giraffe that are endangered. Yes, they keep changing the taxonomy of giraffe, but currently there are four recognized species, some of which have subspecies as well. So you've got the reticulated, the Maasai, the southern, and the northern giraffe. But it is the reticulated and the northern giraffe, which has three subspecies within it. All of those are considered endangered. Not so much the Maasai and the southern giraffe, although as with many animals, there has certainly been a decrease in numbers of all of them over the years. as a result of habitat loss and bushmeat trade, traditional medicines, all of the normal things, unfortunately, that do affect our wildlife, but mostly habitat loss more than anything else. So, two of the four species officially endangered, according to the ICUN. The other two, not so much yet. Oh, Laura Moore, yes, you're saying that giraffe had a mane made of oxpeckers. That's quite difficult to say, a mane made of oxpeckers. He certainly did. Many, many oxpeckers. But nice to see this meeting of minds of Ellie's. Okay, well, it seems that little dispute has been settled for the time being. So I think we're going to head over to Namibia and to Safari Hook and have a look at some of the specially adapted animals. Oh, hang on. What's going on in the background? Nope, just a little bit of a push. Let's go to Safari Hook and have a look at some gemsbok. One of my favorite antelopes. These look at the difference in the vegetation between Namibia and East Africa. Much more barren in these parts. One of my favorite antelopes. I think they've just got such beautiful markings. Almost zebra-like faces. I'm reserving judgment on this stork at the moment. Whether it's a woolly neck or something else, we'd have to have a closer look. It looks like a juvenile. The beautiful horns, these gemsbok, very scimitar-like in shape. And you can see their big feet as well. If you note when they start walking, look how large those hooves are. Good adaptation for walking in sort of soft desert sand. Who are you, Mr. Stork or Mrs. Stork? Show us your head. We have a young black stork. It's definitely not a woolly-necked stork. The gut says a possibly a sort of a juvenile black stork that hasn't developed. Certainly the markings are correct, but hasn't developed the red beak and the red legs yet. So possibly a sub-adult black stork. Yeah, look at those big hooves, those big cloven hooves coming down just to spread the weight out. Well, of course, you do find them traversing across the Namib Desert and other such desolate areas. This one looks a little bit wary of the stork. What is this strange thing at my watering hole? It's giving him a proper stare down. PB and Jam, yeah, I also agree. I think it's a young black stork, a juvenile or a sub-adult black stork. It hasn't developed that very vibrant red legs and red beak, but the black head, neck, and back with the white chest certainly suggests black stork to me. Oh, maybe that's what the Remsbok was watching. Larimore, you're going back to all those oxpeckers. You're asking whether the oxpeckers might beat the lanolin that builds up on the giraffe's fur. For those of you who don't know, lanolin is this sort of waxy substance produced by the skin just to help protect us against the rigors of being outside. Sheep, for example, also do it. I don't know specifically Larimore, but they have been documented. Um, Collecting and eating occasional earwax and things, so I see no reason why the oxpeckers wouldn't feed on it potentially. I can't imagine it's particularly nutrient rich. I'll have to double check that and get back to you, but I would think that they're probably not put off by us, if nothing else. Lovely to see this big elephant enjoying the mud there and now taking the opportunity of a man-made structure to have a well-earned scratch. Seems to be a common theme today, the giraffe having to wait for the elephants to vacate the area before getting a chance to quench their thirst. Spas, you've asked a good question about black storks, which I have to say I've had to do a little bit of reading on because it wasn't something I would expect to see at a isolated pan in Namibia. They're not normally associated with such dry, arid areas. You're asking whether they nest here or are they just flying through Namibia, I think. You're asking whether they're migratory, where else do we find them? It's not a stork that we see much of, and I have to say I've had to go and check my birding app to find out a little bit more of a comprehensive answer. But for everybody's edification, according to what I'm reading here, they say they breed from Western Europe and Denmark, east to northeastern China, south to Japan, non-breeding grounds in tropical Africa and northern India to eastern China. But there is an isolated breeding population from eastern Zambia south into southern Africa. Um, Not many known to be seen in Namibia, it seems. And in terms of numbers, they're actually a little bit less common than I realized. I would say we don't see them all that often, but I've never given sort of too much thought as to why that might be. But they are very much uncommon in this part, estimated to be only about 1,000 breeding pairs um, to maybe 1,300 breeding pairs in southern Africa. That's including Zambia, maybe up to 500 pairs in Zimbabwe, 200 pairs in South Africa, 10 pairs in Swaziland, up to 50 in Lesotho. So a lot less common than I realized, but now I think about it, I don't see black storks all that often, but I do think it's surprising to find one in such an arid area such as this. Come on, giraffe, have a drink. Slightly put off by the presence of this blue wildebeest. Oh, nearly changed our mind again. Watch out for that S of water again when he's finished drinking. Ping, there we go. Well, that was nice to take a little visit across to Safari Hook in Namibia, and lovely to see again so much game concentrated around these water sources. They're so important, these little oases, particularly in these more arid areas. But I think let's head back up to Oldonyo in Kenya and see what that little group of elephants are up to. Some lovely symmetrical tusks, particularly on this one on the right. Maybe it's just perspective, but he seems to have a very large head in comparison to the body. Beautiful tusks on the one on the left as well. So yeah, that one's got a kind of reverse facing tusk, the one just disappearing. You do see that from time to time, like somebody's twisted the tusk 180 degrees round the wrong way. Again, just a little bit of a genetic defect. It seems our old Donyo elephants are a little camera shy today. That's what I'm saying. Thank goodness, a little bit of peace. Enjoy a nice, quiet, quenching drink. Nice to see some water in this water hole as well. Last few times I've done live at the water hole, we haven't visited Old Donyo very much. But when we had, there had been very, very little water in the pan. The deliberate steps that the elephants take. Nope, no more elephants. And see some more of those beautiful umbrella thorns. I see there was a question that came in a little while ago from Cat Fan, which I missed, asking why, particularly up in the Mara and places where you get sort of those just individual trees surrounded by grass and no other trees in the sort of peripheral area, and why you're asking why do they not form clusters of trees or little mini forests, I suppose. Cat Fan, honestly, I don't know. It's a very good question. Whether it's something to do with the nutrients in that particular area of soil, or maybe there were multiple seeds deposited there, and a lot of the young ones got eaten by browsing animals, and just one or two that survived. My gut reaction would be it's something to do with a particular soil type or competition between the trees. You get certain species which are known to be encroaching species that form thick band, thick, dense groups of trees, like the Acacia mellifera, the blackthorn, well known for doing it, the sickle bush, some of the bush willow species, and of course, a lot of the alien vegetation does it as well. But quite why, I know exactly what you mean. There's just acres and acres of grassland and then just a random tree in the middle of it. Why there are not more, I can't honestly give you a satisfactory explanation. It's a good question, Cat Fan. I'll see if I can figure that one out for you. I see we've got some little yellow flowers there, which I'm afraid I have absolutely no idea what they might be, even if we could see them properly. My knowledge of flowers of Kenya is not very good. I have to say, even here, I find flowers very frustrating because we only see them for a couple of months, and every year I learn them, and then in the next 10 months or so, I forget them and I have to go through the same process every single year. They just don't seem to stick. Okay, well, we visited South Africa, Namibia, Kenya, so I suppose it's fitting that we go to Botswana. Let's go to Hyena Pan in Botswana. I think we've got some more ellies there. Or one very large elephant. You see those trees, very favoured rubbing spots. You can see that lovely orange colour of the soil that's been deposited onto the bark as the elephant's using it as a scratching post. And then, of course, you can see all the mapani in the back, another one of those trees which are well known for creating dense, very homogeneous stands of vegetation. But those mapani thickets are considered almost an ecosystem in their own right. We have mapani thickets here in South Africa, particularly as you go up towards northern Kruger, you get sort of bands of them based on the soil type, and they themselves house quite um, predictable surpluses of certain animals. So we get the little Mapani flies, the Mapani bees, very prevalent in those areas. Lots of squirrels, lots of hornbills, because lots of natural cavities in those Mapani trees um, provide perfect nesting opportunities. Of course, the very famous Mapani worm, which is the caterpillar of the Mapani moth, which is collected in huge numbers by local people and eaten either raw or desiccated and sort of crumbled up. I've tried them. I wouldn't recommend them. They are not to my liking in terms of my palate, but revered by many local communities out here. And even a little thing called a Mapani psyllid, which is very much associated with these trees, which are kind of like little, I suppose you could call them lice, but they're in the order of bugs, the Hemiptera, and they pierce the plant tissue and they suck out the sap. And they often form these little waxy, um, what would we call them? Little waxy coverings that they stay underneath to keep them protected from the heat and from drying out. They do have a specific name. Their name evades me for now, but they're also edible. You can actually eat those little crusty, waxy things you find on the underside of mapani leaves. There's some protein in them. Well, seeing as we are circumnavigating the African continent, we have not been to Zimbabwe yet, so let's head over to Victoria Falls, where I think we've got some kudus, which we don't see all too often. Ah, there we go. Thought it was night time in Zimbabwe for a moment, but lovely to see kudus out in the open. There's a brief solar eclipse. Of course, it was thought by Bushmen that lunar eclipses were caused by giant celestial lions placing their paws over the moon to darken the earth to allow their brethren down on the land to have more successful hunting. Wonderful, some of these cultural stories to explain these phenomenon, which science has helped us to understand now. Quite a few young kudus here. They look a little bit skinny, some of these kudus, which surprises me considering the flush of greenery. These two young males look in better condition, though. PB and Jam, you'd love to visit Tanzania, Kenya, and South Africa. Well, then you better get booking, I suggest. You have quite the trip planned by the sounds of it. Kenya, somewhere I've never been to, which is a real shame. I did work for a year up in Tanzania in a place called Katavi National Park. But of course, PB and Jam, you're welcome to contact us on the details on screen if you would like us to help you uh, put together your dream trip. We could certainly do that for you. But I would recommend all of those destinations and more. Every country has its own unique appeal, be it Botswana, be it Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Zambia. They really are all worth eating, worth visiting. I think my personal favorite is Namibia. I just think it's the most spectacular of countries, that it is so desolate yet so beautiful at the same time. And I've never been anywhere with such a feeling of personal space, and also feeling safe within that personal space. Not to mention the beautiful, dark, clear, and dry skies that they have. Not quite sure what this male is doing. Looks like he's licking something as opposed to feeding. Maybe there's a little stump he's scratching his head on. Nara, how often does it happen that males don't develop horns? Phew, I'm trying to think if I've ever seen a male antelope that should have horns without horns. And I honestly can't say that I have. I have seen occasionally female animals that wouldn't normally have horns having horns. We see it in impala from time to time that females develop rather sort of stunted, thin horns due to a hormonal imbalance. Uh, but I don't think that I have personally ever seen or heard, although I have no doubt that it has happened, of a male horned species of antelope not having horns. So I would say less often than the other way around. But yeah, I don't have too much experience in that one, I'm afraid. Billy Judd, yes, we do get two species of kudu in the world, greater and lesser. You're asking which one is bigger. Well, sort of the clue is in the name. The greater kudu, which is the ones you're looking at now, are the larger of the two. They can get up to in excess of 250, maybe even 300 kilograms for a big male. Lesser kudu, I've never seen a lesser kudu, but as I understand it, less than 100 kilograms. So a lot smaller, I believe. So you'd have to go to eastern and northeastern parts of Africa to look for the lesser kudu, so Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania. But I never saw a lesser kudu when I was in Tanzania, but I have just had to check that it's not an animal that I know very well at all. Mindy Tilapau, that's a very deep comment, and I completely agree with you. You're saying with all the complexities of fetal development, it's a wonder any of us come out okay. Isn't nature the coolest? Well, what is what is okay? What is the norm? I don't know. But yes, but it's those genetic mutations which allow adaptation or evolution to take place. Somebody comes up with something strange which does very well, and they pass on those genetics because they've been successful, and those mutations become the new norm. So nature is dynamic, whether it's a tree, an insect, or an elephant, it's constantly changing. Yes, there are certain things that don't change as much as others, but for me, that's very much the if it's not broken, don't fix it mentality. But it is, considering everything that has to happen, it's amazing that so many do come out, let's say, as expected. Lovely, expansive views here in Zimbabwe. But I think let's head back to Safari Hook in Namibia, enjoy some of that more arid environment, and see what those giraffe are up to. Always a pleasure to watch giraffe drink. Trixie Rose, you're back from icy London. I imagine it is rather cool over there this time of year, and you want to know what's the smallest horned female antelope. As far as I know, Trixie Rose, and I, as always, stand to be very much corrected, it would be the dik-dik, or one of the dik-dik species. Tiny little antelopes where both sexes have horns. I did see dik-diks out in Namibia. I couldn't honestly tell you which ones they were, but you get them in East Africa as well. I think different species, but tiny, tiny little antelopes. I'm just trying to think. They can't weigh more than about 5 kilograms, I would think. They look like little, well, they are dwarf antelope, I suppose, by definition, but not much more than 30 or 40 centimeters high. Tiny little things, kind of the size of a baby steenbok, I suppose. This giraffe looks like it's in a bit of a hurry all of a sudden. I love the way those legs move, both left, both right at the same time. That sort of more loping stride pattern. Very unusual to see, shared with the hyena and the camel. Yes, we're talking about you. Sorry. So that's definitely a female from earlier on. You can see how small those ossicones are in comparison to the male that we saw earlier. Much more residual in nature because they're not used for fighting. So possibly something that over the years, many, many years down the line, they might completely disappear altogether. You never know. Looks like in very good condition though, considering the harsh environment. Nice shiny fur, always a good sign of an animal's condition. And nice to see our national animal, of course, as well, a beautiful springbok. A lot of arid specialists in these areas, animals that are very, very well adept at taking water out of the environment and not requiring daily trips to the waterhole. Gemsbok, springbok, giraffe have all very, very efficient digestive systems, can process small quantities of food over long periods of time and extract all of the available water and nutrients within them. And of course, you can see that lovely little triangle of white on their bottoms there, just above that wagging tail, which can open up in very hot temperatures and reflect some of the heat, like a little pouch, and hence the Latin name. Um, Oh, and now having just said that, I need to remember it. Dorcas marsupialis, I think, if I remember rightly, for the springbok, referring to that marsupialis, referring to that pouch above the tail. Mindy Tilliput, I'm not sure why some animals can't be domesticated whilst others can, if I'm honest. I'm sure there's a variety of reasons, be they species related or individual behaviorally related. Um, I take zebras as a good example. Yes, they have been used by people, but they are highly cantankerous by nature and don't like to be told what to do. Um, why that's an evolutionary trait, I am not so sure, but I think unfortunately most animals can be bullied into being domesticated with the threat of violence and pain and discomfort, and they eventually learn. But why some are more susceptible than others, I'm honestly not sure. Ah, Annabelle, I was. Oh, we see we've gone back to June. Sorry, it looks like our camera froze there. But I was waiting for this question to come through today. Annabelle, you're asking. Well, yes, I am in Hoodthroat. You're asking about the planets. I'm sure many of you have seen all over the internet this whole thing about this alignment of planets on the 25th of January. Um, well, unfortunately, it's been very cloudy of late, so there have been very few clear skies. It was relatively clear last night, so I did get a few glimpses of the sky. But yes, we will be able to see, well, here in southern Africa, six planets. We won't be able to see Mercury, it's under the horizon for us here in the southern hemisphere, but I believe it will be visible in the northern hemisphere. Um, but yes, I mean, you can see all six of them now, and we've been able to for quite some time, quite why there's been this big thing about this very specific date. I'm not quite sure. I mean, to be honest, the planets are always lined up in the sky. The difference is, are they close enough to each other from our perspective to see them all after dark? They obviously move around the sun on their orbits, as do we. And there are, from time to time, we have the ability to see all of them, but they all follow basically the same path across the sky. The ecliptic, just like the sun and the moon, which is why you'll always find the planets in or very close to one of the 12 signs of the zodiac, because they are the constellations that the sun seems to pass through from our perspective. So for the last few, well, probably potentially weeks, you've been able to see Venus, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars pretty obviously in the night sky. Venus in the west, Mars in the east after dark. Neptune and, for the sake of giggling, I shall say Uranus, are also visible, but you really need a telescope to see anything. Uranus is right on the limit of human naked eye visibility, and Neptune is just too small and faint to be seen without optical aids. Okay, well, there doesn't seem to be much happening at Juma. Let's head down to the coast and go to Stony Point. Oh, fluffy guinea pig, otherwise known, of course, as a rock hyrax or a rock dassie, enjoying an ocean view. I don't think the screen has frozen. I can see the occasional twitch of an ear. Very much conserving energy, it seems, today. So yes, for any of you interested in this whole planetary alignment thing, so I don't want to take anything away from it. It's a cool thing to see, but we've been able to see all six of those planets for the last few weeks. Mars is particularly bright at the moment. About a week or so ago, it was what we call it opposition, where it's at its closest point to Earth, which is why it seems so bright in the sky, because proximity is important in terms of the apparent luminosity as we view it from Earth. Because a lot of people ask, how close is a particular planet? It's a very difficult question to ask because you might both be on the same side as the sun, or one of you might be on one side of the sun and the other on the other side. So Mars, for example, could be 60 million kilometers at its closest, which is basically where it was last week. But at its furthest, it can be over 400 million kilometers away. So that's why it varies so much in terms of brightness. That confused the ancient people before they understood orbits. And when they had the Earth at the center of everything, they were somewhat at a loss as to why planets would be brighter at times and then dimmer at others, and they came up with all these weird and wonderful scientific formulas to explain it until some bright spark persuaded the world that the sun was the center of everything and we all went around it. Of course, what is an interesting astronomical thing with regard to the planets, although it's a slightly bittersweet thing that's happening, is what's going on with Saturn at the moment. It's very small at present because it is far away from us, but sometime in the next couple of months, I think it's in March, end of March, we won't be able to see the rings at all for a week or so. It sort of flip-flops from our perspective. So sometimes we see more of the rings, and then the orientation changes, and the rings pass through being perfectly lined up. The edge of the rings pointed directly at Earth, and they're so thin that they will completely disappear from view. They'll still be there, but we just need to wait for the planet to oscillate a little bit more or carry on its orbit. So from our perspective, we will see more. A colony of Cape cormorants and one white-bellied cormorant, I see, possibly two. Ah, yes, Annabelle, you also saw the comet last week. Yes, if you've got clear skies, which are not very common in this area at the moment, look to the west just after sunset and look for another one of the comets that were discovered or named after the observatory that found them here in South Africa. Another one of the Atlas comets, C3 Atlas, this one is known as. You should be able to pick it out with the naked eye just after sunset in the west, and certainly with a pair of binoculars. I've seen some nice photographs floating around over the last few days, but regrettably, the conditions have been such here in the Lowveld that I have not been able to view said comet of late. Joan Mello, I'm glad you enjoy a little visit to Stony Point. It is a nice change from what we normally get. And Billy Judd, I'm glad that we showed you one of the hyraxes that you love so much. Speaking of white-breasted cormorants there was an update from the World Bird List, just some changes to bird species. And according to what I read, the white-breasted cormorant is now being grouped together with the great cormorant. So I'm not sure if that means it is merely now considered a subspecies as opposed to a species in its own right. I'll have to double check that. But same with the greenback, or what was the greenback, now the striated heron, has been split, and ours is now known as a little heron, apparently. So lots more changes to bird names due to genetic research. So there is the much larger white-breasted cormorant. It will always remain one of those to me, I'm afraid, despite the name changes. It takes me a while to wrap my head around these new names. It's hard enough to learn all the existing names as is. And there are all of our African penguins. It looks like it's a little bit choppy. Maybe they've decided to stay on the shoreline for now, at least. I see a few of you enjoying these lovely views of the African penguins, endemic, of course, to this area. And Spas, you asking, saying you rarely see them in the ocean. What do they forage on the beach? Honestly, Spas, I'm not really sure. I haven't spent much time with penguins. I know, obviously, out in the open water, they are very accomplished fishermen or fisherwomen. And they will eat various small fish, anchovies, sardines, whatever they can find. I also remember reading that they can dive in excess of 120 meters in search of food, which is pretty amazing. Whether they do forage whilst on the beach, I'm honestly not sure. I think they just come to the beach for nesting, for social communications, for a bit of safety. Um, But yeah, I'm afraid my knowledge of penguins is not particularly good. In fact, I'm ashamed to say I've only ever visited the Cape area of South Africa 2 or 3 times in the last 20 years. I know, Joanne Miller, you were saying you love the ocean and the smell of the salt air, and some people are very much drawn to it. I've always been more of a bush person than an ocean person. I need to be kept occupied. There's so much species diversity and bugs to look at and birds to identify out in the bush that I know some people can just sit on the beach and enjoy it, but my attention span is limited. Unfortunately, maybe a good book, but I'll usually end up digging a hole or building a sandcastle or creating channels and between estuaries and the ocean. I'll keep myself occupied like that. I do enjoy snorkeling though. I tried my hand at scuba diving a few times, particularly out in Bali, which was spectacular. And again, the diversity of the fish. I went to Sodwana Bay a little while ago and did go snorkeling there. And I think after about half an hour, then walked into town and bought a tropical fish book so that I could identify the fish that I was seeing. Hello, little dussies. Look at the lovely tracks of the dussie there. You can actually see them in the sand. There's little 3 toes, big spongy pads that they've got to give them good grip on those rocky habitats that they enjoy. Wildlife lady, I have no idea if there is still a seal around catching and eating those cormorants. However, now that you've mentioned it, I hope we do get to see one. Wedged himself in between these 2 rocks. It's rather comfortable. Well, that was nice to see the ocean. I think let's head back over to Hyena Pan. Sounds like we've had a few more Ellies come down for a drink. Well, lots more Ellies. And some youngsters. See if anybody decides to go for a swim. I'm not sure whether that little pink elephant has been seen on Juma over the last few days, but whilst I was in Timbavati, they also said that recently that they had seen a leucistic elephant as well. Whether it was the same one, I'm not sure. Sorry, Nadine, I missed some of that. I didn't know if you say when it was last seen, but it seems that there have been a couple seen recently over the weekend on Friday. Okay, so not that long ago. But yeah, interesting. So I think there's a couple within the area because I mentioned when I was at Timbavati that we'd seen one down in Juma, and they said they were aware of it, but they had also seen one in their area around the same time. So it looks like there are at least 2 leucistic elephants wandering around the area of the Greater Kruger. Very special to see. We wish them all the best. Of course, it's going to be very difficult in terms of heat regulation again, and sun damage. I remember seeing one at It's on Sabi Sabi around about probably at least 10 years ago now. It even had sort of bluish eyes, a little tiny thing, very, very pink. So you do get them from time to time, but certainly not something you see very often. Leucism in elephants, more common in other things. I have seen leucistic bushbuck, eland, nyala, impala, but yeah, only one fully leucistic elephant in the last 18 years or so that I've been spending in the bush. I've seen others with little patches, sort of partial leucism, but that's the only one that I've seen that was completely leucistic. These two having a splash in the foreground. Lorraine, good. I'm glad that you found today fascinating. Every day in the bush is fascinating. There's always something interesting to watch and to see and to discuss. So I'm glad you've enjoyed it. You're very welcome. Okay, it sounds like we've got Ellie's everywhere. There's some elephants in Naledi. We haven't been to Naledi yet, and we're not too far from the end of the show. So let's head over to Naledi and have a look at those elephants. Oh, don't all leave now. All three of them all the same size and age. That water on the left is not looking particularly inviting at the moment. Looks like a bit of an algal bloom there, brought on by the warmer temperatures, I'm sure. Still good for a bit of a mud splash or a mud wallow by the look of it. This one's coated in mud. Really is lovely to see these elephants moving through long grass. Had a beautiful sighting yesterday. Was it yesterday afternoon? No, day before, Saturday afternoon. Of a lovely herd of elephants with two little tiny ones right out in basically an open field. And it was just so nice to have such clear views of them and watching them feed. And we were trying to identify all the specific little herbaceous plants and forbs that they were choosing with those dexterous fingers at the end of their trunks. They had all this grass to choose from. It was interesting to watch them pull out some creepers. We struggled to identify a lot of them, but evidently there was something in those plants that they felt that they needed at the moment, possibly to counteract all of the highly nutritious food that they are eating at the moment. Looks like a young bull at the back who's beginning that separation process. Half of it nature, half of it nurture, as the adult females will begin to chase them away as they become potentially sexually mature. It does take a little bit of time to develop that independence. I often find them hanging out at the back of the group. But it seems they didn't want to hang around, so I think let's head back down to Tembe, have a catch up with our elephants that side. Actually, really nice to see some zebra here as well. I don't think I've seen zebra on Tembe certainly I don't remember seeing them the last few months. Nice to see different species, zebras and impalas and elephants. We had the giraffe earlier as well. And these little mud wallows in the foreground, ever popular with these big elephant bulls during this season. Wildlife Lady, I'm very happy to hear that you've enjoyed today's live at the waterhole. Don't forget, of course, we will be doing it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, indefinitely. 365 days a year, we will take our daily 2 hour trip around all the different cameras and say you never know what you're going to get. Yeah, Mindy Telepower, it must be a very confusing time, as you said, for those young bulls. I think there is, to some extent, that sort of genetic knowledge that it's time to go and that drive to go and explore pastures greener. But it is facilitated by the mother and the other adult females in the area, and it can be quite brutal. They can get chased off and poked with tusks and pretty much told in no uncertain terms to leave. I like to think that some of it is done under their own free will. But yeah, it must be pretty horrible to feel sort of abandoned. But that is the life of an elephant. And so they do often meet up with one another, probably console each other and complain about their families. And as many of you will know, they'll hook up with the old elephant, the one we saw that I mentioned with the collar in Timbavati with those two broken tusks. He was hanging out with a couple of youngsters as well, educating them and also benefiting from their company and their potential protection. So it's just the way of elephant society. And so there's a lot more going on in these bachelor groups than we often give them credit for. There's definite hierarchies, definite friendships and bonds that are created and held for life, even if they do separate. They will recognize one another, assuming they are not consumed by uh, must and testosterone. Then I would think all allegiances go out of the window. Using that tusk as a trunk rest. But if elephants ever get cramp in their trunks, that would be unpleasant. So many mussels in there, I wouldn't be surprised. I may have to go and do some research on cramp in animals. Nadine's just pointed out that a leopard jumping into a tree and having a bout of cramp would be very unfortunate. But yeah, it must happen. But perhaps because they are constantly moving and they probably stretch a lot more than we do, we have become quite lazy. Um, that perhaps they are less susceptible for it, but lactic acid build-up, and I see no reason why it wouldn't happen. I shall see and enlighten you tomorrow of my investigative efforts of cramp in animals. I would think racehorses and things probably have suffered from cramp over the years. Obviously, that's a little bit more strenuous activity than perhaps they would necessarily be doing otherwise. But you think about elephants moving 20 odd hours a day, that trunk hardly ever stops moving. Whether they have any adaptations to avoid such things, I'm not so sure. You do sometimes see animals being a bit stiff after, especially lions, if they've been sleeping for 20 hours or so, they have to have a good stretch, and you can sometimes see it takes them a while to limber up. Synchronized tail swishing. There it was. Main lover, you are very welcome for today's live at the waterhole. It has been a great day. We've seen some lovely things as always. I think probably for me the highlight was seeing the hippos out of the water right at the beginning. Not something that we get to see every day, but some beautiful views of some gemsbok. Nice to see a young black stork out in Safari Hook. What else have we seen? Yeah, Dussies was sweet. But yeah, it has been a great day. But we are down to the last minute or so. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to stick around and catch up with the team on our sunset safari later this afternoon. And say I will be back tomorrow again at around about 12. Oh, sorry, it's Monday today. I've just realized it's Monday. You will not be able to catch up with the team today. They will be out getting some excellent footage to be used at a later date. So my apologies for that. But I will be back tomorrow at 12:30 for another couple of hours of live at the waterhole, and who knows what we'll find there. But from myself, the team in Johannesburg, from Nadine, a big thank you for joining us. Thank you for all of your questions and comments. And we wish you a wonderful rest of your day, whatever you're up to, and we will catch up with you again tomorrow.